The abandoned mill, a skeletal ruin against the stormy backdrop, loomed ahead. Its crumbling walls and rusted machinery seemed to groan in protest under the relentless onslaught of the rain. The waterfall, usually a source of serene beauty, now churned with an angry intensity, its roar a constant, unsettling hum. Ellis shivered, the chill seeping deeper than the rain-soaked clothes clinging to her skin. The air tasted of iron and decay, a cold miasma that clung to the back of her throat. This place, saturated with the memory of ancient rituals, pulsed with a malevolent energy. It was far more than a clearing in the woods, it was a doorway to a monstrous realm. Flickering shadows danced across the ruins, not cast by the flickering torchlight, but by something unseen and far more sinister. Each raindrop felt like a shard of ice against her exposed skin, a constant reminder of the vulnerability of flesh against the encroaching darkness. The groan of the mill wasn't merely mechanical, it carried a mournful echo, like the lament of a forgotten beast. The waterfall's roar seemed to carry words on the wind, a guttural language she couldn't understand, but which sent a primal shiver down her spine. Her hands tightened around her weapon, a desperate attempt to ground herself against the onslaught of the unnatural. A fleeting thought crossed her mind. Could they truly prevail against an entity steeped in ancient evil? A creature that seemed to seep from the very fabric of this cursed place. Fash of crimson cut through the rain-drenched gloom. It appeared for a mere heartbeat, twin points of malevolent light, flickering from a shadowed alcove within the abandoned mill. Then, just as quickly, the lights vanished, leaving a lingering chill that intensified the oppressive atmosphere. Hank, his form tense beside Ellis, lowered his rifle slightly, his breath hitching in his chest. "Did you see that?" he whispered, barely audible over the roar of the waterfall. Ellis nodded, her mind racing. The crimson eyes, filled with a predatory intelligence, sent a wave of dread through her. That was no mere animal. They were being watched, hunted, by a creature drawn to the power thrumming beneath the storm. Isaiah, his face a mask of grim determination, fumbled with the pages of the book. "It senses him," he murmured, his voice trembling. "The ritual, it's working." He paused, his gaze sweeping the shadows, a silent plea for the creature to reveal itself. Jaden stood at the center of the ritual circle, his form silhouetted against the churning waterfall. The tattoos on his skin pulsed brighter, a sickening beacon in the darkness. A choked cry escaped his lips, a mix of pain and defiance. "It's too strong," he gasped, his voice ragged. "I can't." The air crackled with a surge of unnatural energy. A piercing shriek tore through the night, a prelude to the horror about to descend upon them. From the shadowy depths of the mill, a hulking figure surged forward. It was far larger than any wolf, its form rippling with unnatural muscle and bone. Yellowed fangs glinted in the torchlight, and its eyes, those monstrous crimson orbs, burned with hunger and a terrifying intelligence. The creature didn't charge blindly. It circled, its movements fluid and disturbingly graceful, assessing its prey, savoring the rising terror within the circle. A low, guttural growl rose from its throat, a promise of the carnage to come. Sarah whimpered, clinging to Isaiah. Hank swore, his rifle trembling as he struggled to keep the monstrous wolf in his sights. Ellis's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic counterpoint to the calculated movements of the beast. Then, with a blur of motion, it attacked, not towards Jaden, the center of the ritual, but directly at Ellis. It sensed the threat she represented, the defiant will standing against the encroaching darkness. The monstrous wolf lunged towards Ellis, a blur of claws and teeth. Time seemed to slow, each raindrop crystallizing in the torchlight, every ragged breath echoing through eternity. Fear ignited a primal rage within her. She wasn't merely a sheriff anymore, she was a guardian, a shield against the darkness threatening to consume them all. With a speed born of desperation, Ellis brought her weapon to bear. The rifle roared, the blast echoing through the night. The wolf faltered mid-leap, a startled snore ripping from its throat. The shot hadn't been a clean hit, but it bought them a precious breath, throwing the creature off balance. Hank reacted with veteran instinct, his own rifle thundering in support. The second bullet grazed the wolf's haunches, eliciting a pained howl. It wheeled, its crimson eyes now locked on Hank as a new target, a more immediate threat. Isaiah's voice rose above the din, a chant in the ancient language, weaving a spell of binding, of defiance. The runes on the stones pulsed in response, momentarily driving back the oppressive force radiating from the creature. "It's working," Sarah cried, a flicker of defiant hope cutting through her terror. Jaden gasped, his body racked with tremors as he fought the invisible pull of Naraka. The tattoos on his skin blazed, a beacon of both defiance and vulnerability. The creature hesitated, as if torn between its desire to attack and the invisible bonds of the ritual slowly taking hold. Chaos reigned. The wolf, wounded but still ferocious, circled Hank, seeking an opening. Ellis frantically reloaded, her hands trembling. Each second, each desperate breath, was testament to their fragile defiance against an ancient predator. Then, a flicker of movement in the ruins caught Ellis's eye. Another monstrous shape detached itself from the shadows, its form a grotesque parody of a wildcat, its eyes gleaming a venomous yellow. Panic twisted her gut. "We're surrounded," she yelled, the words barely audible over the roar of the waterfall and the rising chorus of guttural snores. Their desperate gamble wasn't just against a single monster. It was against a burgeoning horde, twisted and corrupted, drawn to the ritual like a grotesque feast. The monstrous cat launched itself from the ruins, its claws raking through the air with vicious speed. Sarah screamed, her voice a thin thread against the rising storm. Isaiah, aged but resolute, thrust himself bodily in the creature's path. The impact knocked him to the ground, his cry of pain drowned out by the guttural snore. Sarah scrambled to his side, her small hands desperately clutching at the creature as it raked its claws across the old man's chest. Hank, his attention torn, fired a hasty shot. The bullet ripped through the beast's shoulder, causing it to shriek in fury. Yet, instead of retreating, it turned its wrath on the wounded Isaiah, its jaws snapping in a grotesque parody of a grin. Ellis fought a wave of nausea and blinding fury. Every fiber of her being screamed at her to help, but the wounded wolf was once again circling her, waiting for an opening. She couldn't divide her attention. To do so would be fatal. Jaden, still at the heart of the ritual circle, let out a choked sob. He was struggling to focus, his body racked with tremors as he fought the invisible pull of Naraka's hunger. The tattoos on his skin blazed brighter, a stark contrast against his damp, pale flesh. The ritual was their only hope, yet their anchor was crumbling under the strain. From the corner of her eye, Ellis caught sight of another monstrous form emerging from the darkness, this one a twisted mockery of a boar, its tusks gleaming wickedly. Her heart sank. There were too many of them, their ranks swelling with every passing heartbeat. Despair threatened to consume her, but she forced it back. With a roar of defiance, she aimed and fired at the circling wolf. The bullet pierced its flank, not a fatal wound, but enough to send it limping in retreat. Then, through the haze of rain and battle, she saw it, a patch of crimson fur, a tattered scrap of clothing clutched in monstrous jaws. The beast with Sarah and Isaiah had disappeared into the shadows. A scream, a child's scream, tore at Ellis's very soul. "Sarah!" Ellis lunged forward, a primal scream ripping from her throat. A powerful hand gripped her shoulder, yanking her back with surprising force. It was Hank, his face grim, his jaw clenched with a desperate resolve that mirrored her own. "No!" he roared, his voice barely audible over the din. "We can't both go after them. The ritual, it won't work without you." His words were a bucket of cold water in the face of her grief-stricken rage. He was right. Without the ritual, they were all doomed. Sarah, Isaiah, everyone. This desperate gamble, this last-ditch effort, hinged on her holding this position. Ellis fought the urge to tear free, her body trembling with a mixture of fear and fury. But, she choked out, her voice thick with emotion. "I'll go," Hank interrupted, his voice surprisingly steady despite the chaos around them. "I know these woods. I can track them. Buy you some time." He squeezed her shoulder one last time, his grip conveying a silent promise, a desperate hope. Then, with a determined glint in his eyes, he turned and vanished into the rain-soaked darkness, the sounds of his pursuit echoing through the night. Ellis, left alone amidst the circling horde, a cold knot of dread twisting in her gut, knew this was her moment of truth. She had to hold the line, not just for herself, but for everyone she cared about. The fate of the town, the very fabric of reality, rested on her shoulders and on the flickering embers of defiance burning within Jaden's weakening form. The battle raged on. Ellis, her movements honed by fear and fury, fended off the monstrous boar. The creature was relentless, its strength unnatural, each swipe of its tusks coming dangerously close. Yet, she held her ground, fueled by the desperate need to protect the ritual at all costs. Jaden's agonized cries echoed above the din. The tattoos on his skin were now a blazing inferno, mirroring the intensity of the storm itself. The binding runes carved upon the stones flickered and pulsed, responding to the surge of raw, chaotic energy radiating from the boy. The air crackled, heavy with the unnatural. A hush fell over the battlefield, a terrible silence broken only by Jaden's ragged gasps and the heavy panting of the creatures closing in. Even the oppressive downpour seemed to falter. Time, for a single, breathless moment, slowed to a crawl. Then, from the heart of the ruins, a monstrous shape emerged. Bathed in the eerie glow of the ritual, it stepped into the clearing with predatory grace. It wasn't a beast, not like those it commanded. This was Naraka. Its true form was a chilling tapestry of nightmare and myth. Crimson eyes, filled with a malevolent intelligence, dominated a face twisted into a monstrous caricature of a wolf. Its skeletal frame was draped in tattered flesh, revealing glimpses of bone and pulsing black veins. The air hummed with power, a suffocating pressure that choked the very breath from Ellis's lungs. The monstrous creatures, previously so eager to attack, now whimpered and cowered, sensing the presence of their true master. Naraka stalked towards Jaden, a twisted mockery of a smile playing on its lips. "Such a fragile vessel," it hissed, its voice a chorus of whispers echoing through the night. "So much potential." Jaden collapsed, his body racked with convulsions. The tattoos pulsed erratically, moments away from consuming him entirely. The runes on the stones flickered wildly, their glow threatening to extinguish. Isaiah, battered and bleeding, scrambled to his feet. He raised his trembling hands, his voice a desperate plea against the encroaching darkness. The ancient words tumbled out, woven with a newfound urgency, a final defiant incantation. Naraka turned, its gaze fixing on Isaiah with chilling curiosity. Then, with a flick of its clawed hand, a tendril of darkness shot out, snaking across the ground. It wrapped around Isaiah's withered form, squeezing with impossible strength. A ragged scream filled the night. Isaiah's frail body lifted off the ground, his choked cries abruptly cut off. Naraka held him aloft, an offering, a sacrifice to quell its monstrous hunger. Jaden let out a strangled cry, the tattoos on his skin burning white-hot. A final surge of energy pulsed from the ritual circle, the stones vibrating violently. With an earth-shattering roar, a beam of ethereal light engulfed Naraka, forcing it to recoil. The concentrated surge of power from the ritual caused Naraka to roar in agony, the ancient magic threatening to drag it back to the abyss whence it came. Its monstrous form rippled, the shadows that comprised its being flickering in and out of existence. Ellis, filled with a desperate hope, thought their desperate gamble might actually succeed. Her heart ached for Jaden, for Isaiah, for all they had sacrificed. Yet the possibility of driving the creature back, of saving their world, ignited a fierce determination within her. Then, with a sickening twist, the tide began to turn. Under the onslaught of the ritual's power, Naraka's form didn't dissipate. It twisted, warped, and condensed, as though the creature was reshaping itself, seeking a loophole, a desperate escape from its intended fate. Crimson eyes, gleaming with a malevolent intelligence, flickered towards Jaden. The creature, pushed to the brink, sensed an opportunity within the fragile human vessel that bound it to this world. In its desperation, it found a horrifying form of salvation. Isaiah's eyes widened as realization twisted his weathered features. "No," he cried out, his voice a strangled plea against the unimaginable. "It seeks refuge in the vessel." The ethereal light from the ritual, meant to banish Naraka, became a conduit, a bridge between the creature and its new sanctuary. Naraka's form dissolved, transforming into a swirling vortex of shadows, a concentrated essence of its monstrous power. With terrifying speed, the darkness streaked across the clearing, defying all laws of physics and reality. It slammed into Jaden, engulfing his body in a blinding flash. His agonized scream was a dissonant symphony of pain and terror, echoing through the storm. The surge of energy, the clash of ancient ritual, and Naraka's twisted survival instinct caused the stones to crack, the runes to sputter and fade. The waterfall roared in response, the churned waters momentarily turning a blood-red hue, mirroring the horror unfolding within the circle. Then, silence fell. The rain still pattered down, but the storm's fury had abated. Jaden lay on the soaked ground, his form eerily still. Naraka, in its monstrous form, had vanished, its malevolent presence seemingly exorcised. The creatures surrounding the clearing whimpered, confused by their leader's absence, and slowly dispersed into the gloom. But a new kind of darkness now hung in the air, an unsettling stillness that spoke of the monstrous transformation that had just transpired. Ellis rushed towards Jaden, her heart pounding. He was alive, his chest rising and falling in shallow breaths, but something was off. His skin was unnaturally pale, his features frozen in a mask of chilling stillness. The tattoos, once a pulsing beacon of his connection to Naraka, seemed to have faded into his skin. "Jaden," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Please, wake up." His eyes remained closed, the eerie tranquility of his features a terrifying contrast to the chaos of the night. A cold dread began to coil within her. They had survived. But at what cost? Hank stumbled forward, his weathered face mirroring a mixture of relief and unease. "Is it over?" he asked, his voice laced with a desperate hope. "Is he all right?" Before Ellis could answer, Isaiah reached them. His aged form seemed to carry the weight of the world, a weariness that went beyond physical exhaustion. He knelt beside the boy, his gaze lingering on the faded tattoos, his touch hesitant as he felt Jaden's cool skin. A flicker of sorrow, of terrible understanding, passed over his face. Hesitantly, he looked at Ellis. Though he spoke softly, his words carried the weight of a death sentence. "He is changed," Isaiah murmured. "The ritual, it did not banish the darkness, it merely altered it." Hank's brow furrowed. "What do you mean? The creature, it's gone, right?" Ellis forced herself to speak, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't think so." She met Isaiah's eyes, seeing in them a dark echo of her own fears. The old man knew, or at least suspected, the terrible truth. The ritual hadn't failed entirely, but it hadn't succeeded either. Naraka was still present, its monstrous essence now entangled with Jaden's, a dormant parasite biding its time. The first rays of dawn painted the sky with pale streaks, a cruel mockery of hope amidst the ruins. The storm had finally abated, leaving them with a shattered semblance of normalcy. Hank, sensing their silent exchange, lowered his rifle. A flicker of doubt crossed his face. "What do we do now?" he asked, his voice filled with an unspoken plea for answers they didn't have. Ellis looked at the unconscious boy, her heart a mix of protectiveness and dread. They had won the battle, but the war was far from over. Their victory was bittersweet, tainted with the knowledge that the true enemy now lurked within, waiting for the moment to strike. They were left with a lingering uncertainty, a chilling suspicion that their nightmare had merely changed its terrifying form. The return to town was a stark juxtaposition. They emerged from the rain-ravaged forest, a shell-shocked procession bearing the unconscious Jaden, to find the townsfolk gathered in the square. Word of their ordeal had spread, but with it a hopeful rumor: the monster had been defeated. Children ran towards them, eyes wide with a mix of excitement and lingering fear. Sarah, her small hand clutching Ellis's, wore a tentative smile. The townsfolk erupted in ragged cheers, their relief a bittersweet balm in the face of the horrors they had witnessed. Ellis, hardened by the night's events, kept her expression carefully neutral. She couldn't let them see the despair gnawing at her, couldn't reveal the knowledge she shared with Isaiah. They needed this moment of solace, however fleeting. Jaden stirred, his eyelids fluttering. He groaned, his voice weak. What happened? The tattoos on his skin were barely a whisper now, their ominous glow extinguished. His confusion mirrored the townsfolk's belief. They thought the nightmare was over. Ellis hesitated, unsure how to answer. Should she lie? Give him false hope? But Isaiah laid a gentle hand on her arm, his gaze conveying a silent plea for honesty, however harsh. "You were incredibly brave, Jaden," Ellis finally said, her voice steady. "We're not sure of everything that happened, but we'll figure it out together." Her words, a half-truth at best, offered a promise of support without revealing the horrifying reality.